A storm is brewing in Malaysia.
Now is monsoon season. We have La Nina. The probability of having rain is very high.
The start of the monsoon season has stoked fears of impending floods.
The disaster management agencies recognize that what happened last year could repeat itself this year.
It has rekindled painful memories of last year's 1 in 100 years flood.
Masa tu memang teruk sangat. Tak ada orang datang buat pertolongan ke.
Is Malaysia better prepared to deal with another major disaster if it happens again? And with the general election just around the corner, will the monsoon cost crucial votes for the ruling coalition? November 2022. Menacing storm clouds are gathering ominously over Malaysia's capital, Kuala Lumpur, bringing with them thundery showers over many areas of the city. These weather conditions have become fairly common, especially in the last quarter of the year. All of a sudden, life has been reduced to a crawl. The gloomy weather has left many worried if major floods which hit the country last year could come back to haunt them again.
I think the disaster management agencies recognize that what happened last year could repeat itself this year. So the preparations are underway. In fact, we have fortnight briefings on the preparation. It's known as Flood Task Force on the preparation for the upcoming Northeast monsoon season.
As early as September this year, the Malaysia Meteorological Agency had warned of heavy rains during the year-end monsoon. Just last month in October, continuous rains had caused flash floods in several areas in the northern Malaysian states of Penang, Perlis and Kedah.
Our prediction is that the amount of rainfall that we're going to receive during the coming Northeast monsoon season is roughly about the same as what had occurred last year. But the impact where there's going to be heavy flooding, where there's going to be just medium or moderate type of flooding, that is beyond our prediction capability.
These flood warnings, however, have put many residents on edge, and that includes those people living in the Klang Valley and the surrounding states, including Selangor and Pahang. These were the areas which bore the brunt of last year's massive floods. One of them is 67-year-old retiree Phua Thiem Hua, a resident of a small town known as Kampong Kasipile in Klang, Selangor. Every time it rains, he'd make it a point to visit this canal, a few hundred meters away from where he lives.
如果嚟講落水嚟講落長水咧，我哋就驚嘅。如果我哋知道佢嘅水上唔上得，我哋走去睇河水，我哋都知道嘅。除非係喺上邊放水，佢嘅河水急，我哋就驚；開河水唔急，我哋就唔驚。
Kiem Hua is among many residents of the village who were forced to flee their homes in December last year when flood waters rose rapidly.
我哋心媽係好驚啦，但係唔知道佢會浸到幾高，跟住9點幾就浸到差唔多成4尺咁樣，跟住我哋心媽走出去華出嗰度唔敢喺屋企入邊，跟住到11點幾就已經浸到成7尺幾啦。 跟住我哋心媽有啲都企唔到咗，心媽跟住嗰啲真係好多都壞啊！雪櫃又冧落嚟，又壞電視機又壞，總之係電器嘅嘢全部壞。
The December 2021 floods were the worst that Malaysia faced in decades. Days of intense and continuous monsoon rains had inundated many parts of the country. Roads turned into rivers and villages into islands.
The monsoonal surge was very strong December last year, and there was this tropical depression which moved inland into Peninsula Malaysia and traveled west, and finally ending up over the Straits of Malacca. It regained strength, as I mentioned, and also there was this Typhoon Rai at the time. Three factors which was responsible for the heavy downpour.
When it subsided, this perfect storm left more than 50 dead. 40-year-old Shahriza Ismail's family was almost included in the statistic. On the night of December 16, 2021, Shah had to rush home from work after he heard the news that his village in Shah Alam, Selangor was hit by flash floods.
Ya, waktu tu memang tak boleh masuk. Jadi saya tak tahu apa dekat sana, nak call tak, nak telefon tak boleh, apa tak boleh, sama redor je lah. Sebenarnya tak tahulah pula sampai air ni akan naik sampai paras tu.
In the meantime, his wife was battling for her life.
Tengok air tu terlampau deras. Jadi saya tak boleh nak pergi tempat yang lebih selamat lah. Sebab laluan dekat sebelah rumah saya tu ialah jalan raya. Lepas tu dia jadi laluan air. Jadi air semua menghentam dekat rumah saya. Semua benda yang pokok ke apa semua menghentam ke rumah saya. Jadi bila saya buka pintu, saya terus berpaut dekat tingkap sebab air terlampau deras. Saya cuba memanjat atas ni untuk melompat dekat kawasan yang air dia tak terlampau deras. Tapi mungkin pegangan saya tak kuat, saya terlepas, and then saya pun hanyut lah. Kebetulan hanyut tu, masa saya hanyut tu, arus air tu menghentam badan saya ke dinding. Jadi saya cepat-cepat mencapai pintu atau tingkap yang saya boleh pegang lah. Saya berpaut dekat pintu tu lah sampai anak buah saya selamatkan saya.
Both Shah and his family were only reunited the next day when the water levels had receded. 8 of the 11 Malaysian states in the peninsula were all hit by floods. From the east coast of Kelantan and Terengganu to the western and central regions of Malaysia, including Pahang, Selangor, Kuala Lumpur, Negeri Sembilan, and Malacca. The capital of Kuala Lumpur historically received an average rainfall of 2,400 millimeters annually. But on December 18, 2021, measuring stations in the city registered 1,141 millimeters of rain in a single day.
Last year, rainfall, which was supposed to fall in a month, occurred within 2 days. The drainage system, the rivers, couldn't cope with that humongous or that huge amount of rainfall that has entered our drainage system. All these factors made the flood worse. Yeah.
The overall damage to public assets and infrastructure amounted to almost $1.5 billion. City Councillor for Shah Alam, V. Raidu Viraman's house was not spared from the destruction. Heavy rains pushed 7 feet of water into his home. Disregarding his own property damage, Raidu helped other flood victims to evacuate.
I drove the boat, I learned it on the spot, I helped a lot of people. I really saved more than 20 families. I witnessed myself at the Bulatan Sri Aman, one baby, when the Nadma, the boat, they want to take the, some turn and coming in, one baby dawned, suddenly gone, the baby. The mother, while I think we call it, it's not stable a bit, the boat was full of people, the baby was down into the water. Because the height of water is very high, I think second or third day, very, very high. could be more than nearly 10 feet. So no one dared to, to rescue the baby. So that was very sad part for me, my whole life.
Around 120,000 people were forced into relief centres during the height of the year-end monsoon season. But even some who found safer shores had to go through the harrowing experience of surviving without food and water.
We don't have access to, even from boat, because all the vehicle was parked nearby that, and then after flood, all the vehicle was stuck. So the communication of the road was disconnected. That's the main reason we could not do a proper deliver even the food and other things. And even after flood, I know my relation, not a relation, very close friend of mine, his mother passed away because of the frustration, she cannot take it. The entire house is gone.
46-year-old Selva Kuma was among those who went without food for 2 days after flood waters entered his house.
Bila anak semua tanya, Pak lapar lah, tak boleh tahan. Nasib baik ada satu kakak tu dia ada bawa makan sikit. Dia bawa ayam mas macam tu. Ayam tu dia bagi kita. Bila dia bagi tu, ada keluarga tak makan. Sebab budak-budak kecil semua ada dalam tu. Ada yang tak boleh nak bagi susu. Air panas tak ada, macam mana nak bagi? Semua macam nak menangis dah. Dah lapar sangat, tak boleh tahan. Sebab kita macam dah terlalu depression. Masa hari pun, budak-budak semua tak boleh tahan. Satu budak dia dah masuk terjun, dia cakap, saya nak keluar, saya boleh tahan, tak boleh tahan. Dia cakap, lapar, terlalu lapar. Memang sedih sangat saya cakap.
No one was brave enough to jump in to save him because the water was too deep. The boy's fate remains unknown.
Rumah habis, rosak, barang-barang semua rosak. Sampai tile-tile tu pecah. Sebab 6 hari dia dalam air tu bertakung dalam tu. Saya ada satu kedai serba nikat kat sini. Kedai pun habis. Dekat 120,000 habis. Lepas tu kereta rosak. Lori rosak. Habis saya punya saving semua habis.
This year, rain clouds gather once again as the monsoon season approaches. The states that weathered last year's storms are on tenterhooks. And the question is being asked, could proper mitigation measures have prevented the devastation of 2021? Malaysia lies outside the historical cyclone paths, making it safe from direct cyclone hits. Unfortunately, it can't shield itself from the monsoon rains.
Malaysia is maybe blessed, to be located quite near to the equator, which means we are enjoying a tropical climate. And the tropical climate has the characteristics of being hot, humid, and at the same time very wet. So with the location near the Charles China Sea, the monsoon season will hit us usually at the end of the year from November, sometime up to January or February.
The coastal areas of peninsular Malaysia are the most prone to flooding, especially during the northeast monsoon season from October to March. But in December 2021, a tropical depression made landfall on the eastern coast of peninsular Malaysia. A tropical depression occurs when air that has been heated by warm ocean waters rise, creating a low-pressure area. Cool air rushes in to fill this low-pressure area, bringing strong winds and rains. In Malaysia, this resulted in widespread torrential rains inland, including the capital Kuala Lumpur and neighbouring Selangor, where flooding was uncommon.
Normally, the northern monsoon is usually country in the east coast, but sometimes the remnant pass over the main range. So not necessarily we experience in this region, in the Klang Valley, experience flood during the northern monsoon. But this year is La Nina. It's a combination of La Nina, the water vapor is already very high, and then added with northern monsoon, then all that possibly can cause big flood. And that if that happened during the high tide, the situation will be much more worse.
And because the northeast monsoon typically affected the east coast, the level of preparation was not the same throughout the country.
Because the East Coast people, they have the awareness on disaster awareness level are higher compared, this is my own assumption, compared to people over the western part of peninsula, because the East Coast people, they are used to the annual flood. So the awareness level, they know how to react when they see water rising and so on. In fact, some of their houses, they have boats to evacuate themselves. They have a high awareness level. But those in the West Coast, Selangor, say, and Kuala Lumpur, the last event was 1971, as I mentioned. That was a very long time ago. Maybe those people who experienced flood at that time are no longer around. So I would say they were not really prepared for that kind of flood.
The residents were not the only ones surprised by the severity of the floods. Even the authorities were caught out, including disaster management agencies.
Pada waktu itu, kita boleh katakan bahawa fokusnya adalah kepada persiapan di Pantai Timur. Dan apa yang berlaku pada Disember pada tahun 2021, kebanyakan orang were caught in surprise. Sekiranya banjir dalam skala yang biasa, insyaAllah kita boleh tangani dengan baik. Tetapi apabila ianya berlaku dengan skala yang lebih besar, so kita mengambil sedikit masa untuk mengatur gerak daripada segi bantuan, daripada segi kerja-kerja menyelamat dan sebagainya. Dan kita kena terima juga hakikatnya pada Disember 2021, pada waktu itu banjir bertembung dengan fenomena air pasang besar. So ianya telah menyebabkan lokasi-lokasi yang ditenggelami air adalah sangat banyak, dan dalam masa yang sama boleh dikatakan kebanyakan lokasi menjadi pulau. So walaupun kita mempunyai aset, walaupun kita mempunyai jentera dan juga manpower, tetapi kita menghadapi kekangan dan juga terhad daripada segi akses ke tempat-tempat tersebut. So itu yang mengambil sedikit masa daripada segi untuk menyegerakan bantuan dan juga kerja-kerja menyelamat ini tadi.
Many like Selva felt that the government aid was inadequate. He and his family braved the floods to seek shelter at a school a couple of 100 meters from their home. But at the school, they were left stranded for days without food and water.
Masa tu memang teruk sangat. Kita minta pertolongan pun tak ada. Tak ada orang datang buat pertolongan ke apa-apa pun tak ada. Kita pun keluar dari lepas 4 hari dari sekolah kebangsaan. Kita duduk kat sekolah kebangsaan tu. Jadi kita lepas 4 hari baru kita keluar dari sana. Memang disappointed. Saya betul-betul tension. Tak ada orang politik yang tolong. Itu yang kita memang terlalu marah kat dia orang.
As the waters subsided, people began to show their displeasure at the perceived poor government response. A campaign called "Do Not Donate Here" started trending on social media. Its goal? To stop donations to government aid agencies.
In any disaster, if any disaster happens, and if the disaster response fails or didn't meet the expectation of the people, the voters will naturally be angry with the incumbent.
UMNO's information chief, Sharil Hamdan, also admits that the government was caught off guard by the sheer volume of rainfall as well as the scale of the disaster.
That was once in decades type of situation. In Selangor, for example, none of us had seen anything approaching that kind of severity. So obviously there were weaknesses in the ways that the response was done in terms of the speed, but I think we learned really quickly, and the assistance and the aid that came soon after, in terms of the amount of cash aid to victims, home repairs, new homes being built, that was also unprecedented. So the response and the reaction, maybe in the first 24-48 hours could have been better, but after that, I think we, if not more than made up, we really responded seriously and in a big way as well under our current caretaker Prime Minister.
Floods like those of 2021 could become a common occurrence in Malaysia. As sea waters warm due to climate change, tropical depressions and typhoons will occur more frequently. One study puts KL on the watch list of cities most at risk of flooding by 2050. Preparing the cities for this will take significant investment and infrastructure redesign.
Had we built our cities, to be able to accommodate for any changes in the climate, we would not have faced the flooding at a disaster level as we did last year. It would have been a minimum impact because we already prepared for it. The impact on the people's lives and the property would have been minimized had we designed the city, or at least the whole urban areas within the Klang Valley had been designed in a way that you allow water to be absorbed, extra water to be absorbed when comes heavy downpour. I mean, like what we have. So this concept of building cities like a sponge, because what's the happening here in especially in KL? I mean, we are actually at the right location. You see, we have a river here which looks more like a monsoon drain to me because of the way the embankment is being treated. These are hard surfaces which doesn't absorb water. And the way where we're standing is all paved up. Tarmac is the worst material in terms of water absorption. And if you don't have enough green open spaces with soil as is ground cover that can help to absorb water, where do you think the water will go? So the water will be actually, the rivers will be swollen.
But while the government is looking for ways to prevent future flooding, it's also been under immense pressure to seek a fresh mandate to govern the country for another 5 years. It will do so on November 19 at the next general election, and it will happen in the midst of the monsoon season. On October 11, 2022, Malaysian Prime Minister Ismail Sabri Yaakob announced the dissolution of Parliament. This paves the way for snap polls. The vote is called almost 8 months before the current parliamentary term expires next July, but the timing of the election has stirred up controversy. The November 19 polls will coincide with the monsoon season, expected to begin from the middle of this month until March next year. And experts warn that the amount of rainfall will be similar to last year.
Now is actually monsoon season. We have La Nina. The probability of having rain is very high. So the rain might actually fall during the election day. Flood also will. It's possible to have flood during that time. Now already we can see flooding some places. So I think it's not impossible.
I think the government has taken all the factors into account when they decide on the election this year. Because what we can do is we can offer advice. We can tell them that this monsoon is going to begin on the middle part of November. That's about it that we can offer our advice to the government.
Because of this, the decision by the Prime Minister to call for early elections has drawn flack from opposition parties.
Jabatan Meteorology has predicted that monsoon season will transition from October to November, and it will be particularly bad from November onwards. We witnessed what happened last year in Malaysia, when 10 days we lost more than 6.5 billion ringgit. More than 50 lives were lost, 500,000 Malaysians badly affected. These are not just normal floods, flash floods, floods coming together with huge logging woods, destroying villages and houses. This is no joke. And the fact that the government knows this, but yet still willfully and intentionally decides to call for election in which millions of Malaysians must come out to vote, instead of focusing on flood relief effort, preparation, helping them, I think is truly irresponsible and regrettable.
As if a sign of things to come, heavy rains caused flash floods in the state of Penang less than a week after the dissolution of Parliament. This follows similar floods in KL earlier this October.
Even though the flood severity is not like the December 2021, but it's already happening. So this is no longer something that may happen. It is already happening in different parts of Malaysia. And that's why we say this is not the right time.
In Klang Utama in Selangor, small business owners brace for more bad weather. Many were badly hit by last December's deluge. For one, optical shop owner Errol Teo suffered an estimated $13,000 in losses when the flood waters filled his store.
On December 18, 2021, the flood affected this shop in Taman Klang Utama, and it was a total damage on everything here, and all the cabinets were soaked in the water for 3 days. And the water level is about this high, so I have to move everything. Even though inside the drawer all the stocks are gone, only left are the upper part, which is wall hanging that would be safe, and all the cabinets are gone. I have to replace it.
Just 800 meters away from Errol's shop, 63-year-old Benson Tan almost lost his motorcycle spare parts business, which he spent 20 years building up.
Most of my spare part materials are flooded, so those metal one all cannot be used. So my losses are coming at around 100K. The furniture also cannot be used. The door, the chair, the table, the cabinet, everything gone. I need to start all over again. No way to cover. Because the government also didn't give us any fund or assistance at all. Just leave us alone.
Like in other parts of Malaysia, flood relief was slow to come. Residents at Klang Utama took matters into their own hands when little help arrived.
我们能够自救然后自己帮助自己。那时候我们是居民协会，我们帮助我们的这个居民，要求人开这个救灾中心。我们主要是帮助人来到这个临时救灾中心，我们直接叫他就你们先上去这个学校的楼上，因为那边学校也是淹水，但是第2、第3、第4楼肯定是没有淹水了，所以叫他们去上面休息。
Okey. Masa yang berlaku tu, saya memang salut kepada rakyat. Rakyat tak ada orang nak tolong kita. Masa itulah saya pandang kita punya, orang cakap bersatu tu kan. Memang saya pandang masa tu. Tak kira bangsa. Makan ke apa ke tak kira langsung. Baju ke, tolong masa makan apa pun tak kira bangsa langsung. Itu time lah memang rakyat betul-betul bagus. Tak, ini bukan politik, tapi rakyat yang mantap sangat. Itu yang saya respect. Kalau boleh, kerajaan sebelum berlaku ni, tolonglah buat satu. Jangan tunggu sampai dah berlaku.
Then we ourselves have to find a small, boat, some sort of boat, we call it sampan, to pull the food to provide to them, because they are unable to come out. Because the worst area in Taman Klang Utama, the water level is about chest area. So for those old folks, they are unable to walk, on wheelchair, they have to stay at home, we will bring the food to them.
We see many average Malaysian going in with their own boats and sampans to save people from rooftops, to provide food aid to them, to provide medical support to them. All indicates that when you rely on people, on the average Malaysian, to save lives, it shows that there's a clear state failure.
After the 2021 floods, the government pledged around $335 million in flood relief, including up to $1,100 in monetary assistance to households affected by the disaster. Johor ruler Sultan Ibrahim Sultan Iskandar has also donated more than 100,000 makeshift tents worth some $4 million. They're to be used for disaster victims nationwide. But almost 1 year on, businesses, buildings and facilities have yet to fully recover.
you have to go in and relocate the residents, and then you have to help them clean. And when they start clearing, all the mattresses, furnitures, all destroyed by the flood, you then need to mobilize local council to come in and help. There's a lot of things for people to rebuild their home in that sense, right? And then when that happens, the last thing on their mind would be, oh, I need to go out and vote. And because of that, I think it is almost illogical to hold an election when it's the monsoon season.
As rain clouds gather once more in the capital, some, like Benson and Tan Poh Hock, find the timing of the elections alarming.
I personally not encouraged for the election. The main purpose of election is to select our member of parliament as well as the assemblymen to assist us. But it's raining and floating, how are we going to select them? Very bad, I disagree.
如果讲到这个政治的啦其实政府应该是要关心我们的民生的问题啦如果以期来的话，不讲要改选不要改选，因为这个东西我们也 control 不到的但是最重要的是我们的这个民生的问题一定要解决，因为政府是由人民选出来的
Despite the outcry from the public and opposition, the ruling party is confident that the government has accounted for floods when making election plans.
Banjir, kita tak boleh mengelak banjir ni. Apa yang telah dibuat ialah dia telah tubuh jawatankuasa. Yang KSN telah mengadakan beberapa mesyuarat dalam kabinet pun kita dibincang masalah banjir, persiapan awal pun telah dibagi tahu kalau berlaku banjir apa tindakan. Jadi yang itu telah pun diuruskan oleh pihak kerajaan. Kalau ditakdirkan berlaku banjir, maka kita dalam peraturan kita pilihan raya, dalam perlembagaan kita juga memang boleh untuk kita tangguhkan. Jadi kalau dia lama lagi banjir, maka boleh pula isytihat darurat. Bila isytihat darurat, boleh tangguh lagi pilihan raya.
We should have faith in the agencies involved in flood relief and any rescue efforts or any flood management issues will be managed despite any elections being held during the same time. That's point number one, and that's the most key point. There's actually provisions within the law for the Election Commission to delay the polling date. So I think we have more room for maneuver than maybe people realize. So this is not to say we're not concerned, but I think it's something that we can manage.
Floods are happening day in and day out, and now they want to use undemocratic means to stay and cling on to power. I mean, if they already plan to cling on to power via emergency orders, why not just push back election next year? Why were they so desperate to dissolve parliament now?
The question for many then is why the decision to hold the elections now, almost 8 months ahead of schedule. The reason, according to observers, is a political one.
This is the time that when the opposition is yet to be united. I mean, if you look back in 2018, elections were called at a time when the opposition was already contesting as a united front, projecting a united front with a prime minister candidate. So I guess a bigger risk for Barisan Nasional is to wait until the opposition is united.
In 2018, the opposition coalition, Pakatan Harapan, ousted Barisan Nasional from government, ending their 6-decade rule. The PH victory was achieved on the back of corruption allegations surrounding then Prime Minister Najib Razak. In the years since, politicking saw Barisan Nasional and its largest component party, UMNO, return to power, even as Najib has been convicted of graft.
I think UMNO just would like to speed it up, especially since they've seen Najib has gone to jail, and so I suppose with the expectation that there will be more court charges or anything else that might come up, that if they don't win, then more people are going to be charged. The assumption really is that they're trying to hasten things so that they can calm down the situation and so that they can get control of cabinet and parliament, because now they don't have complete control.
Will this strategy pay off? Or could bad weather rain on Barisan Nasional's parade? Malaysia is in a grip of yet another election fever. Just days before Malaysians go to the polls, cities, towns and villages are filled with party flags and banners. But along with the familiar political paraphernalia, something unusual lined the riverbanks and canals here in the flood-prone Klang Valley. Rows upon rows of sandbags, tightly packed against each other. The sandbags are meant to divert floodwaters from homes and commercial spaces in the event of heavy monsoon rains. But while sandbags can mitigate rising floodwaters, preventing rivers from bursting their banks, they are not a long-term solution.
They are placing sandbags. When I went to inspect the sandbags are already broken. Sandbags are placed on only one side of the river. Sandbags are not blocking the entire stretch. There are holes and gaps in between, which means this would render it ineffective.
Kampong Kasipilai is a small town in the Klang Valley. It was among many areas which were badly hit by flash floods last year.
呢條河好多垃圾嘅啫喎，執嗰時啊有嗰啲床單啊，有時啊嗰啲木啊、嗰啲樹啊，人哋斬咗嗰啲樹心啊掟晒喺條河啊，變咗上邊流晒落嚟啊，真係好揦渣嘅，黐埋嗰啲垃圾呢度。所以啊，做咩我哋就係驚浸水就係咁樣咯。以前有清河嘅，跟住成10年都未見過去清，跟住去嘅嗰啲神手啊，又嚟到喺嗰度做下樣，成3、4個月戰攞走都冇睇到去清啊，接排戰睇到去清啫。
The perceived inaction could play out in the polls. Along with the usual issues like cost of living and race that surround Malaysian politics, the floods have added another dimension to this year's elections. Whether the government's flood response has been adequate.
I think there will be anger, especially if there has been no improvements in infrastructure. But from what I see, I think like the local agencies are doing what they can to make sure the drains are cleared. So some areas that are regularly flooded now are flooding a bit less.
For urban design analyst Dr. Shuhana Shamsuddin, she has yet to see a comprehensive solution.
I think things are still there. There's no dramatic. I think they have done short-term measures. They have been observing the points where there are flash floods and so forth. But that, like I said, that's just a firefighting approach, very ad hoc basis. What we need is a long-term solution to how we deal with the problem. There should be a long-term strategy how to deal with these climate issues rather than this firefighting approach. I mean, why wait for the disaster to happen before you do something?
But Muhammad Shah Osman from the Disaster Management Office point out that efforts are underway.
So sandbag tersebut bukannya ditempatkan untuk MTL semata-mata, tetapi sandbag tersebut memang diletakkan bagi tujuan mitigation untuk mengelakkan sekiranya air naiklah. Mitigasi. So selain daripada sandbag ini tadi, kita juga membuat kerja-kerja penyelenggaraan saliran. Kita mendalamkan sungai, kita memastikan saliran-saliran dan juga longkang ini tadi tidak tersumbat dan ataupun ada apa-apa halangan bagi membolehkan air mengalir dengan lebih laju dan supaya air daripada upstream ini boleh mengalir ke downstream dalam keadaan yang lebih pantas.
The government will be implementing the $30 million flood mitigation plan by 2030. There are also plans to build a 28-kilometer flood wall at the flash flood hotspot, which will eventually replace the sandbags. Until then, drains must be cleared regularly to prevent chokes to water flow.
You can see some local councils were moving to clear the drains and in preparation for the oncoming season. But there's only so much you can do because this requires big infrastructural solutions. That takes a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of willpower because it inconveniences a lot of people. This is the issue, right? These things take time.
There's a lot of talking, but what we need in Malaysia is to walk the talk, not to talk the talk. I mean, day in, day out, you just talk about it. So with the correct mindset, because sustainability is not about the objects, it's not about the plans, it's not about the documents or report, it's about the mindset and the culture.
Long-term climate mitigation projects will take considerable resources and political will. Voting can be a way for residents to motivate politicians to act. However, the monsoon could keep citizens from turning up at the polls.
Of course, election, it might affect the whole country, but this is about life. If there's no rain, I might go out and work. But if there's a rain, I might take care of my family and we stay at home.
If raining, how to come and work? We are worried about our family, our shop, our business, and our residents, especially those elderly people, and those are OKU, they have difficulty in walking, and those are living in the terrace houses also.
Kita takut masa mengundi tu nak kena pakai bot. Itu yang kita risau. Kan. Jadi kalau benda bukan pasal PRU pun, kalau dah banjir tu bantuan tu pun lambat. Ni PRU ni tak tahu lah macam mana kan. Saya harap-harapkan benda pun sekarang ni dah tetapkan tarikh untuk mengundi apa semua bagai. Kita hadap je lah kalau banjir ke apa. Itu je lah.
In the last election, voter turnout reached a record high of 82.32%. More than 12 million voters turned up at the polls. And that helped propel Pakatan Harapan coalition to power in a historic election. But after several changes in government, there are signs that political apathy has crept into the electorate. A 2021 survey by the Merdeka Centre showed that 2/3 of youths have little interest in politics. Add inclement weather, and voter turnout could be much lower than 2018.
Well, we can't predict, right? Because there is that apathy. But perhaps if there's no storm and there is no flood, then perhaps people will turn out. We're not really seeing that energy this time. There seems to be a wariness. So I think we're a bit in the dip now, where people are just so tired after COVID, so exhausted with the 3 changes in government over the last 4 or 5 years, that really there's no telling what can happen.
Yeah, the turnout will definitely be lower than 2018. We don't see that much excitement, especially among our opposition supporters. So traditionally, lower voter turnout will benefit Barisan Nasional.
I don't think it's as simple as the lower the turnout, the better it is for us. That suggests that we want the lower turnout. I personally don't, and I haven't heard any of my colleagues in the party openly or even privately saying, oh, we want a lower turnout, we want a lower turnout. That's not really how democracy works. Of course, we want as many of our hardcore supporters to come out as possible, but there is also, as a young person, there's a desire to see younger people, now that they've been given the right to vote and they've been given an easier path to voting with this automatic registration and the reduction of the threshold for voting age, to use that right.
Yet, while heavy rains might affect turnout, it could also be a double-edged sword. One used by the opposition to point to government failures.
If there's a great flood, I think the anger will be there, very high against the people who make them do this in the midst of, election, having to go through flood.
I believe civil servants are a lot more prepared, but I don't think politicians are. Because when dissolution took place, it shows that they do not care much about the lives of people or about the potential victims during the monsoon season. I mean, it just shows that politics comes first before welfare.
Yeah, of course. I mean, being the incumbent, the federal government has more resources, access to more resources, access to personnel, access to government machinery to lead the relief efforts. So the incumbent will be punished by the voters if the response is seen to be inadequate.
4 years on from 2018, and Malaysians are heading to the polls with a changed political landscape. They are now confronted with a fractured opposition. Whether it's Pakatan Harapan or Perikatan Nasional, Pejuang or Muda, the parties have not come together as a united front, instead competing against each other for votes. They are also up against a resurgent UMNO and Barisan Nasional, riding the momentum from convincing wins in back-to-back state elections. And the incumbents have pressed the advantage, taking a calculated risk in calling snap polls during the monsoon season.
So at the end of the day, the expectation is that if there is a low voter turnout, the ones who will turn out, no matter what, fire, storm, hail, are the UMNO supporters.
That era of one dominant coalition is over. I think what we've had since 2018 or 2020 perhaps, and also in the near future is, with 2 or 3 credible coalitions who are, who are equally capable of taking over the government.
November 19 will show if the gamble pays dividends.